Welcome into the Spiritual Reality Podcast. God sets reality. If we're not seeing things from His perspective, we're not living in reality. So do me a favor and subscribe, especially on YouTube, if you find this content helpful, and tell a friend about the show. Today, we're talking about a common deconstructionist claim that Christianity is really just a myth that is based on the ideas that are stolen from other religions. Is that true? We're going to take a look at that. We're going to take a deep dive into that. And at the end, I'm gonna talk about a couple of recent stories, news stories, and how Christian principles relate to those things. And so we're going to take a look at the idea that the Trump administration has floated that they might ban all immigration from certain nations for a time. We're going to take a look at that. And we're going to take a look at the recent move that the Secretary of Agriculture has made, telling states that will not provide statistics on who they're providing SNAP benefits to, that they may not get those SNAP benefits if they keep doing what they're doing. So what's the Christian perspective on those two things? Let's get to it. Well, one of the common issues that critics of Christianity and deconstructionists raise is they say that Christianity is really just a conglomeration of stories borrowed from other religions throughout history. Specifically, they claim that Jesus' life mirrors the stories of Horus, Dionysus, Adonis, Attis, and Mithras. And this theory originated really in the 19th century among liberal German theologians. They compared Jesus to popular dying and rising gods from places like Mesopotamia, Syria, Asia Minor, and Egypt. And scholars of the day did not take any of these assertions seriously. So it's important to understand that when they came out with these ideas and scholars sat down and evaluated them, they were not taken seriously at all. It has only been since they've been able to spread quickly without verification or true investigation on the internet that they have become wildly popular. One of the popular examples is featured in the movie Zeitgeist, and it's that Jesus' life mirrors Horus, the Egyptian god. And the movie asserts that Horus was born on December 25th by a virgin named Isis Mary. Interesting, strange combination of names, if you think about it. We're going to look into that. A star proclaimed his arrival. 3 kings came to adore him. He became a child prodigy teacher at age 12. At 30, he was baptized and began ministry. He had 12 disciples. He was betrayed. He was crucified. He was buried for 3 days, and he came back to life. Man, if that's true, if all of that is true about a particular Egyptian god that supposedly lived or was the legend or the myth or the religion of that was created before Jesus, then it kind of seems like that Jesus just took the whole story, right? That Christianity just took the whole story and just ran with it. So those are the claims. But what do the actual writings about Horus say? Well, first of all, Horus was born to Isis. There's no mention of her being called Mary at all. Moreover, Mary, it's interesting that they choose to attach that name to it because Mary is our anglicized form of her real name, which is Miriam, spelled with a Y or spelled with an I in the middle, either way, but Miriam. Mary was not even used in the original text of Scripture. So it's just kind of funny that they're trying to attach a name to it, which we are using the anglicized version now. Isis was not a virgin. She was the widow of Horus and conceived Horus with Horus. And so Horus was born during the month of Koyak, which is October/November, not December 25th. Sorry, my pronunciation on that. Further, there's no mention in the Bible as to Christ's actual birth date. And so I think if we're all being honest as Christians, we're saying we're kind of guessing on Christ's birthday anyhow, but that's not actually Horus's birth date at all. There's no record of 3 kings visiting Horus at his birth. The Bible also never states the actual number of magi that came to see Christ, so that's interesting. Horus is not a savior in any way, and he did not die for anyone. There are no accounts of Horus being a teacher at age 12. Horus was not baptized. The only account of Horus that involves water is one story where Horus is torn to pieces with Isis requesting the crocodile god to fish him out of the water. Horus did not really have a ministry. That's just a label that they've chosen to put on whatever he did. Horus did not have 12 disciples. According to the accounts, Horus had 4 demigods, gods, that followed him, and there are some indications of 16 human followers and an unknown number of blacksmiths that went to battle with him. There's no account of Horus being betrayed by a friend. Horus did not die by crucifixion. There are various accounts of Horus's death, but none of them involve crucifixion. There is no account of Horus being buried for 3 days. Horus was not resurrected. There's no account of Horus coming out of the grave with the body that he went in with. Some accounts have Horus/Osiris being brought back to life by Isis and then becoming the lord of the underworld, like a zombie of some kind. So not the same at all. Now, there's also the story of Mithras, and it's very similar. People claim that he was born of a virgin, crucified, rose again in 3 days. But what does this story actually say? Well, it says he was born out of a solid rock, not from a woman at all. He battled first with the sun and then with a primeval bull, thought to be the first act of creation. Mithras killed the bull, which then became the ground of life for the human race. So, I mean, this story is wildly different than anything that has to do with Christianity. His birth was celebrated on December 25th, along with winter solstice. So it was celebrated there because of that. There is a long explanation as to why December 25th was chosen to celebrate the birth of Christ. And it has a lot to do with the belief that he was conceived on March 25th. For some reason, there was a lot of fascination in the past from scholars about when was he conceived, and they felt like it was March 25th. I think what they're trying to do is line the date of his death up with the date of his conception for some reason. That was very important to them. And so naturally, the date to celebrate his birth became December 25th. So the date was not picked in order to be like Mithras at all, or to replace a pagan holiday. There's no mention of Mithras being a great teacher. There's no mention of him having 12 disciples. The idea that Mithras had 12 disciples may have come from a mural in which he's surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac. So he did not have a bodily resurrection. Rather, when Mithras completed his earthly mission, he was taken to paradise on a chariot, alive and well. The early Christian writer Tertullian did write about the Mithraic cultus reenacting resurrection scenes, but this occurred well after New Testament times. So if any copycatting was done, it was Mithraicism copying Christianity. Isn't that interesting? The early writings say nothing about him being resurrected, but after Jesus was resurrected, they chose to add that to their story. According to gotquestions.org, more examples can be given of Krishna, Attis, Dionysus, and other mythical gods, but the result is the same. In the end, the historical Jesus portrayed in the Bible is unique. The alleged similarities of Jesus' story to pagan myths are greatly exaggerated. And further, while tales of Horus, Mithras, and others predate Christianity, there is very little historical record of the pre-Christian beliefs of those religions. In other words, yeah, those ideas and those thoughts started before Christianity, but we don't have a ton to go on as far as what they believed. The vast majority of the earliest writings of these religions date from the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. When did Jesus come? 1st century AD. So that's when the vast majority of them, so to assume that the pre-Christian beliefs of these religions, of which there's not a lot of record, were identical to post-Christian beliefs is naive. It's even more logical to attribute any similarities between these religions and Christianity to those religions copying Christian teaching about Jesus. That's what really makes sense. This brings us to the subject of the truthfulness of the New Testament. No other work of antiquity has more evidence to its historical veracity than the New Testament. The New Testament has more writers, has 9, better writers, earlier writers than any other existing document from that era. Further, history testifies that these writers went to their deaths claiming that Jesus had risen from the dead. And while some people may die for a lie that they think is true, nobody rationally, especially 12 individuals, die for something that they know is false. Think about it. if you were threatened with crucifixion, as the tradition says happened to the Apostle Peter, and all you had to do to save your life was to renounce a lie that you know that you were telling, you know it was a lie, what would you do? In addition, and think about that 12 times over, by the way. In addition, history has shown that it takes at least 2 generations to pass before myth can kind of enter an historical account. And that's because as long as there are eyewitnesses to the event, errors can be refuted and mythical embellishments can be exposed. All of the Gospels of the New Testament were written during the lifetime of eyewitnesses, with some of Paul's epistles being written as early as 50 AD. So Paul directly appeals to contemporary witnesses to verify his testimony in 1 Corinthians 15. He just straight up says, hey, you can check with the people. If you want to know who they are, I can tell you. So the New Testament attests to the fact that in the first century, Jesus was not mistaken for any other God. This is important to think about. When Paul preached in Athens, the elite thinkers of that city, they said to him, he seems to be a proclaimer of strange deities. They didn't say we've heard all this before, because he was preaching about Jesus and the resurrection, and that's something they had not heard. And so they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know this new teaching that you are proclaiming, for you are bringing some strange things to our ears, so we want to know what these things mean. Clearly, if Paul was simply rehashing stories of other gods, the Athenians would have not referred to this as some new or strange teaching. If dying and rising gods were plentiful in the first century, why, when the Apostle Paul preached Jesus rising from the dead, did they feel like, why didn't they just say, oh, this seems a lot like Horus or Mithras? Why did they not say that? They were very knowledgeable. They knew of these things and should have known of these things. In conclusion, the claim that Jesus is a copy of mythological gods originated with authors whose works have been discounted by academia. They contain logical fallacies, and they cannot compare to the New Testament Gospels, which have withstood nearly 2,000 years of intense scrutiny. The alleged parallels between Jesus and other gods disappear when the original myths are examined. The Jesus is a myth theory relies on selective descriptions, redefined words, and false assumptions. So I hope that gives you some context on how to deal with that particular objection. Now, before we go, let's jump into a couple of things that have happened in the news, mostly political things, mostly coming from the Trump administration. Trump is talking about a new immigration and travel ban from 19 countries. And many people feel that Trump is being racist, he's being xenophobic. They feel that he's being a dictator in the way that he's handling things like this. However, one thing to consider is that the problem has been allowed to get so bad that dealing with it looks very aggressive. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. When you think about actually fixing the messes that have been allowed to be created in our government, it almost looks like fascism, as people like to claim, to actually step in and fix it, because you really have to get a handle on it. So, for years we've been importing people who actually hate American principles. They have no plans to assimilate in our culture. And there's nothing wrong with Americans feeling like our culture and our principles are worth preserving. We've been shamed into believing that we shouldn't feel that way. That's not whiteness to feel that way. When we say our culture, we're talking about freedom of speech. We're talking about liberty for all. We're talking about just hard work and perseverance and the things that built America. That's not whiteness. That's not something we need to repent of. And so our immigration system used to be based on who could come here and make our country better. It used to be based on people coming here because they believed in the American system. They obviously preserved parts of their culture, but they were also anxious to become a part of American culture. And that's not happening anymore. And you've seen protests and interviews where immigrants are saying that their plan is to abolish the U.S. government. Their plan is to make the U.S. a Muslim nation and so forth. Recently, a man made a viral social media reel where he talked about that they were going to outbreed native-born Americans and replace our terrible culture. He said we had terrible music, terrible food. We're a terrible country. And they're here to do away with what was here. So some of these actions may seem extreme in order to get a handle on what's going on, I think you would have to be lying to yourself if you don't believe that certain groups are using our generosity against us to destroy America. And you can say, well, it's not as broad sweeping as you're making it sound. It's not as big a deal. I get that, but I believe that we need to make our decisions based on about who comes based on the values that we used to use. If you visit Ellis Island in New York, they will tell you that if a person did not have a way to make a living, or if they didn't have enough money to get started at the time, they were sent back. We can't keep importing people who will be a drain on our economy and are intentionally here to be a drain on our economy. Our economy is going to implode if we keep doing that. Despite what people will say about it being more Christian to allow open immigration with no accountability, it is Christian to expect people to take care of themselves. And I just want to continue to rehash this because people get upset about when I talk about this. A Christian's responsibility is to love their neighbor. I don't care who it is, where they're from, just love their neighbor. That's a Christian's responsibility. But the biblical role of government is to protect its people, to do what is best for its nation, and to make sure that that nation prospers. And so those are two different roles. And any nation that does away with this standard of accountability will find out that if you give money out without accountability, your money will be worth nothing, prices will be sky high, and there will not be enough contributors to pay for those who are taking the handouts. It's human nature. There is no utopian way to sidestep it. So, I don't think it's unchristian or racist to stop immigration from countries that seem to be sending people who don't like us until we can get a better system to determine who will benefit our country. I don't think that is unchristian at all. Another issue that's very similar situation when it comes to accountability, government accountability. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins is threatening to cut off SNAP benefits to states who won't share their statistics with the federal government. There's only one reason they would not want to share these statistics. What kind of government doesn't ask for accountability or for records for the money that they're throwing at a problem? And that's what we've been had going on. And this is going to be spun in the media as the administration trying to starve families, but really it will be the states that are starving the families by not complying with a simple request for accountability for all the money that is being spent. If this country doesn't grasp this principle, that public money that is public money that is spent must have accountability and transparency, we have no hope of fixing the spending problem and the debt problem that we have in this nation. Listen, God is all for people helping people in need. All for it. He's all for us doing that. We should do that. But he is also all for responsibility, financial accountability, and expecting people to be personally responsible for themselves and for their families. And let's just be honest, for decades, we've had massive government programs with almost no accountability. Spending is completely out of control, and it's time that somebody tracks down the waste, fraud, and abuse and is going to stop it. And the media is always going to spin that as unfeeling, unkind, taking food out of the mouths of children. But I guarantee you that is, and if that begins to happen, I'll be the first to talk about it. But at the same time, even if we are feeding children that are in need, I want to know what are we doing to help their families get a leg up and begin to care for themselves and not just depend on the government. One of the things that you saw when SNAP benefits were paused because of the government shutdown is you saw how many Americans are on SNAP. It's half of what it takes to elect a president. Think about that. Half of what it takes to elect, actually more than half of what it takes to elect a president are regularly living off the government for basic needs. Now, there can be all kinds of reasons for that, but that's an issue. If we're continuing if we're continuing to just add more and more people and they're not using it as a hand up, and they're not getting off of it at some point, then slowly our government's just taking care of everybody, and there's not enough contributors to pay for that. And so we have a problem in our nation. There's a lot of different questions about how to fix that, but definitely accountability taking dead people off those rolls and that kind of thing is something that absolutely should be done, and having the statistics for it, the records for it, makes perfect sense. So that's all I have for this week. Thanks for joining me. We will see you next week.